Welcome back. Welcome back. We're here on a Thursday evening talking about Alabama's playoff chances. Saturday quickly approaching. Of course, we're going to talk Chattanooga. Of course, we're going to talk Auburn. But we have got to talk the major topic at hand, the topic dominating college football, and that's the playoffs. Kyle, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. Excited to talk about Alabama football once again going into this Chattanooga week. And you look to Alabama's next three games, there's a lot on the line. The stakes are high for Alabama in every single game. And I think the message for Nick Saban this week was to focus on this game. And why? Well, he showed him the 2016 game where Chattanooga was leading this team 3-0. Can you imagine what that type of a score or some sort of a snafu where Alabama's only up 10-0 or something like that up against the halftime break? That would be an elimination as well. So Coach Saban said today, even on the Pat McAfee show, he said we have to continue to full throttle right now. We have to be able to keep that momentum. And as you know, if you played sports, keeping momentum is so important. Alabama has so much momentum. Nobody in the college football world wants them into the playoffs right now because this team is so hot. And I mean that not the committee. They have their own agenda, whatever. But if you're an opposing coach, you think you want this red hot Alabama team inside the playoffs? Absolutely not. So it's really important for Alabama to keep the momentum and, continue to go full go against Chattanooga 100%.
And, Nick Saban had some interesting comments about Chattanooga themselves, and I went and checked out their receiving core. This is a wide receiving room that's deadly. They have two guys right on the precipice of 1,000 yards, another one over 500 yards. They've been able to put up big numbers. Alabama, I believe, has the best secondary in the nation, and it's going to be a fantastic game for them to display that. But before we really start diving into Chattanooga and really talking about something I'm really happy you brought up, Kyle, which is style points, we're going to dive into that. A few days have passed. It's marinated. And so I have to ask the question of you and the chat. Now that a few days have separated us from the last time we sat here, do you think the committee still got it wrong, or can you start to see their reasoning? Because frankly, I'm still angry and I'm still lost.
No, I think you bring up a great point. And this was from your the last show that we had together. And I was thinking about this today. You're saying that, and this was spot on. The committee is saying that Florida State's best win is LSU, and they're harping on that LSU win, and they're loving that, and they're highlighting that. But it's not the same for Alabama, right? They're like, well, they beat LSU. But for Florida State, they're like, they beat LSU. And then you tack on the fact that they beat Tennessee and they beat Ole Miss. It's really impressive when you look to Alabama's resume overall and you compare it to a team like, even Florida State, even though the Seminoles are playing at a really good level right now. I mean, Jordan Travis, we talked about this several times. I mean, he's balling out. But when you compare it to teams like Oregon, like go to Oregon's schedule. And here we are again talking about Oregon's resume. Who have they beaten, honestly, besides Utah? Tell me. And so when you look to why Oregon is ranked above Alabama, it kind of makes you frustrated if you're an Alabama football fan, if you've been following the Crimson Tide, if you're a college football fan, because from when you're comparing these two teams, Alabama should certainly be ahead of them. But they mentioned this word on the college football playoff show the other night. They said boxing out. And they said that Texas is boxing out Alabama right now. And then I kind of paired it with something that the chair of the committee said going into every single week for the playoff committee. This is Boo Corrigan, who is the chair for NC State. He said, every single week we have a clean slate. Well, if you have a clean slate, then the last 2 weeks, Texas has won games by a total of 6 points. That's in their last two games. And when you compare that to what Alabama's done in their last two games, those have been convincing victories. So it's hard to see why Alabama is still where they're at, but we all know that you just got to continue to win out. And style points is so important right now. Now, I would say this. Now, Coach Saban doesn't like to run up the score, and I'm not saying you put 90 or whatever, but look, Oregon has a score against Portland State that the committee loves. They scored 80 points in that game. It was like 81-7 or whatever. Go look it up. So style points are important. It's not about, the rat poison and get these other players in. No, you have to go full go right now. You have to beat Chattanooga. You have to be up in that game almost 28-0 from the get-go because the committee wants style points. They have made that clear. That's why they continue to put Michigan up there. That's why they continue to love Georgia at the beginning of the part. But before Georgia didn't have all these last two wins, they love style points. Play a weak schedule and you will be rewarded. So this game for Alabama is an opportunity not for the younger guys to get in, which they probably will, but it's a chance for style points. So you need a massive showing on Saturday. This is not the game to play around with. You have to put Chattanooga away 100%.
Yeah, I'm happy that the committee moved Georgia to number 1 after their win against Ole Miss, because I was really starting to doubt a lot from the committee because it wasn't making sense. Georgia got that win, they move up, but once again, it echoes the same question I've been asking. Alabama holds a win over Ole Miss. They hold a win over LSU, over Tennessee. You hope that it continues going down the line. And to kind of recap, you hinted on my main frustration here. It revolves completely around Oregon. At least with Texas, and I do agree with you. Here recently, Alabama has played a much better brand of football than have the Longhorns, especially coming off of this past week where Texas really struggled against TCU. Alabama excelled against Kentucky. So I completely agree with you. At least, though, Texas is the only other team outside of Alabama that can look at the committee and say, we've played 3 ranked teams by your standard and we've won. Oregon has not played a schedule that is difficult as it relates to Texas and Alabama, and yet they're rewarded. And ultimately, I arrive at this question. Why is Florida State ahead of Washington if Oregon is such a great team? Washington beat Oregon.
Sure.
That right there fundamentally causes this major concern for me. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because it's caused me to lose some sleep. I just fundamentally don't get it. But I love what you said. You have got to win out and then style points. Alabama is being punished and listen, if you're punished for a loss, that's fine. You lost the game. That in and of itself is punishing. Kyle, am I wrong in thinking Bama is being punished more for the USF win than the Texas loss?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, when you look to the early season for Alabama, I think the committee and everybody else in the college football world that hasn't watched Alabama is so fixated on the first 3 games of the season for Alabama, really weeks 2 and week 3. I think they're like, okay, this team is still reminiscent of the week 2 loss against Texas and that week 3 game against South Florida. Look, everybody knows that they were tied with South Florida 3-3 or whatever it was at halftime. Jalen Milroe did not play a single snap in that game. Since then, what has Alabama done? They have won 8 games in a row. They are 7-0 against SEC opponents. They are red hot. They are laser focused. For the people continuing to criticize Jalen Milroe, you're absolutely wrong. I mean, this guy has had as much growth as Carson Beck for Georgia. And I know we have some Georgia Bulldog fans inside the comment box. Look, your quarterback, he's not the same quarterback as he was in week 1 because trust me, nobody thought much of Carson Beck. Seriously, they were like, okay, this is a serviceable quarterback. Right now, Carson Beck is an absolute baller, a guy that is trending upwards 100%, and a guy that can get the football to Ladd McConkey, now a healthy Brock Bowers. He's completely balling out. So is Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe has a lot of weapons around him, and the great thing about that is they're developing more chemistry with Tommy Rees. And as we go forward and as we continue to see, Rees is unleashing Jalen Milroe, and I think they're going to be like, at this point, when they do play an Auburn, when they do play at Georgia, they're going to be like, look, you're healthy. Go out there and take over the game. Prove that you are the top player, not in this game, but in college football. Because I know there's some guys, Bo Nix, Penix, even Carson Beck, Brock Bowers. There's some guys that are amazing, Jaden Daniels. But I'm telling you, Jalen Milroe has an ability to be the best overall college football player in the entire country. 6'2", 230, all the weapons that he has around him, the confidence that he has. And he still has kind of that chip on his shoulder because of doubters. They continue to doubt him. People are going to, continue to point things that he's not doing at a high level. The guy continues to, just impress week after week.
I completely agree. And I think this goes back to something I talked about not long ago. One of the most impressive things about Jalen Milroe, Kyle, think about it like this. He did not see the development under Bill O'Brien that he has seen in a very short time under Tommy Rees. And I understand it. It's much different working with a starter as opposed to trying to develop a backup, though you would like your offensive coordinator to develop your backup in case of emergency, which is a situation we see all too often in college football. I'm of the belief he still has a long ways to go in terms of his growth, which if you're an Alabama fan, that's amazing. If you're a college football fan, That's a little bit scary. Now, I'm going to ask the question of you and of chat before we start kind of turning our attention to what Alabama has to do. Theoretically, if Bama wins out, should they make the playoffs?
Yes, 100%. I think if they're able to beat Georgia, who by the way is the number one team in the country right now, I have it, Georgia and Bama. Honestly, those are the two top teams in college football. I think they're playing at the highest level. I think Alabama's resume speaks for itself. So right now, at this point in time, as November 16th, those are the two top teams in college football. Those are the hottest teams. With Brock Bowers back, I mean, how can you not list Georgia number one after they beat convincingly wins over Ole Miss and against Missouri, a really good Missouri team. So I think if Alabama takes care of Chattanooga, Auburn, and they go into that game regardless of what the score is against Georgia, and they're able to put away the Bulldogs and Kirby Smart, a two-time defending champ who at that point will have won how many games? 30 in a row or something like that? If Alabama is able to win the SEC championship game and continue to prove the naysayers wrong and win at this high of a level, then Alabama 100% in. And Ty, let me ask you a question, man. If Alabama wins that game and Georgia is undefeated at that point, they beat Tennessee on the road, they're able to take care of Georgia Tech, and they just have one loss, and it's to a red-hot Alabama team, is Georgia left out of the playoffs?
That's a really interesting question. And official Sam P says Texas would get in because they have the head-to-head. Here's the interesting thing, though, Sam. The Big 12 just changed their rules so that previously it looked like Oklahoma State was poised to be in the Big 12 championship. Now Texas could be in a situation where, yes, they could win out and win the Big 12 championship. They would not be playing a ranked team in theory if they were to draw Iowa State, which is a plausible thing right now. Or I'm sorry, Kansas State. There's a situation where the Big 12 champion could be decided between Texas and an unranked opponent. If that happens, Alabama would then have 4 ranked wins per the College Football Playoff Committee, downing Georgia at number 1, giving them the best win in all of college football. And we have to understand, college football is a marathon. It must be looked at in totality. If we look at the first 2 weeks and say that decides the rest of the season, why play any football after week 3? It must be looked at in totality. Much like a story, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Just because something happens in the beginning does not dictate the ending, because what could occur in the middle.
Sure.
So I'm super interested in this. I love that question because it would be really hard to leave Georgia out. If they lost to Alabama and Alabama is surging in the way they are right now, you're going to have a hard time convincing me that there are 4, or outside of Alabama, that there would be 2 teams in college football better than Georgia. That'd be a tough argument for me to buy, because I just think Georgia is one of the 4 best teams in college football. I think Alabama is playing like it right now.
I mean, Adam is saying right here in the comment box, he poses a great question. What happens if Washington and Florida State are undefeated, Texas wins out, and Bama wins the SEC game? And you don't even mention, Adam, whatever happens in the Big Ten, because one of those teams is likely to go undefeated as well. So, and one of those teams is likely to be a one-loss team. So if there was a year for an 18 playoff, this is the year. We are kind of in the playoffs already. That's a great question, because you look at Florida State, how they would end their season. They have a game against Northern Alabama taking place this weekend, and then they play Florida on the road at the Swamp. That's a challenging game. You look to Washington. Ty, we talked about this recently. Actually, a 2.5-point underdog against Oregon State. Now, let me ask you this, and everybody listen to this. This is very important. Where is this Washington State? If Washington beats Oregon State, can you imagine what that's going to do for them in the rankings? Could they potentially go to 4? This committee loves Oregon State. They really, this committee, honestly, they love the Pac-12, 100%. They love the Pac-12, and they seem to really like the Big Ten.
This is an interesting situation, and if you're an Alabama fan, you're rooting for 2 teams this weekend. Always you're wearing your Crimson Tide. That goes without saying. You're also an Oregon State fan.
Yeah.
Because when we look at Oregon State, they have to play Washington, and they still have Oregon. Kyle, Oregon State could answer all the questions for us and make it to where this handles itself, which is why I entered this into the poll, right? Could we see some shakeup among the currently undefeated teams? You bring up that inevitably we will see shakeup between Ohio State and Michigan. They're on a collision course. They play. Inevitably, we will see shakeup between Oregon, and Washington. But could we see it before we get to that point? I want to hear from you, and then obviously I want to hear from chat. Early results say 86% say we'll see some shakeup before we get to those championship games. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we will. You look to the Pac-12, the games that are taking place. I mean, if Oregon State doesn't beat Washington, then maybe they beat Oregon. That's a game that we all kind of, are watching. You have, as I mentioned, Florida State, who's playing on the road in 2 weeks against Florida. So you look at some of those games. I just think that Florida State right now, somebody said that they're a pretender inside the Look, I've been harping on that same thing, that Florida State is a pretender. Yeah. But the thing is, like, Jordan Travis is playing at such a high level, and their schedule is so favorable. And look at Louisville. If they beat Louisville in the back end for that ACC title game, that's only going to just solidify them right into the playoffs. I mean, look, are there some teams that could lose? Sure, but other than that Pac-12 matchup, I mean, I think the favorites are coasting this weekend once again. I mean, you have Texas. They're playing Iowa State this weekend, and that game's up in Ames, Iowa. Those games can get squirrely sometimes, and then you have Texas Tech the following week for Texas, and Texas Tech can bring it. I mean, Texas Tech early in the season played Oregon, I believe. The game was tight. I think it was 38-30. So, comparing scores is always kind of strange, but I mean, still, the Red Raiders are tough to get through. And as you said, the Big 12 on the back end, we still don't know who's going to be in that title game.
Yeah, and before we really transition and start talking about the opponents we have left, Samp says that Alabama needs Georgia to win out, and Samp, I completely agree with you. The best thing for Alabama is if Georgia continues winning and winning convincingly, and if Alabama beats Georgia in the SEC championship game, that helps Alabama's case. So I agree with you. Best case for Alabama is that Georgia continues winning because you need that number one win, especially with how the committee is looking at this.
Sure.
Kyle, let's transition because you said something earlier, and it's like you read my mind. I didn't tell you the poll question, which makes it even better. Does Alabama need style points to make the college football playoffs?
Yeah, that's the one thing they're kind of lacking is the style points. I mean, even someone in the comment box said that, well, Georgia beat Kentucky by more points than, Alabama did, which is true. With that said, that the way that two games have gone against Alabama in style points is the LSU game and Kentucky game, because LSU scored a touchdown right before halftime that they shouldn't have, and then Will Reichard missed 2 field goals. That was an opportunity for style points, which was really rare. The guy hadn't missed a kick all season long and misses 2 against LSU. And then against Kentucky, the Wildcats make a late drive, break a long run. Caleb Downs makes a great play, and then it was literally a fumble on the 1 yard line. They didn't even review the play, and then Kentucky punches it in. So the score should have really been 49-14. So similar to what Georgia was. But Alabama needs stop points, 100%. I mean, we talked earlier in the show about beating Chattanooga, and what you have to do against Chattanooga is you have to focus on that game, and you have to stop those wide receivers. Alabama's secondary is, of course, tested. Look at the guys that they went against: Texas, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Tennessee, LSU. These wide receivers are talented as well. It's a lower caliber team. We all know that. With that said, I mean, strange things do happen. I remember a game a couple years ago against the Citadel where the game was tied at halftime, 10-10 or whatever. That would be so detrimental to what Alabama wants to do going forward and really hurt their goals, even if they are to win, because everybody is watching Alabama with a microscope, the same way we are all these top 8 teams. So I think style points is certainly impressive. I think you have to get up by a good margin. I think the defense has to play good, and the secondary is there's a couple key notes going into this game for Alabama's secondary. So you're going to likely be without Jalen Key, who's a starter for the second consecutive game dealing with the quad. So who's going to step in at that safety spot? It could be Devontae Smith. Now you're out there like, what? Devontae Smith plays for the Eagles. No, Alabama has another Devontae Smith. And Devontae Smith was probably going to be the safety starter at the beginning of the season. Hurt his foot. Haven't seen him up into this Kentucky game. He did dress out. I think he might have spot played a little bit. So look for him to potentially be playing against Chattanooga. You also have Christian Story back there. So those are the things that we're watching. Maybe even a freshman by the name of Tony Mitchell, the 5-star, a guy who dealt with all that stuff in the offseason. He's been on, low key, and he's done his job, and he's been getting a little bit of, playing time here and there. So that's what we're watching in secondary. Other than that, you have an inside linebacker by Deontay Lawson, who's probably going to be out as well. So look for Jahad Campbell, and then Georgia transfer Trezor Marshall to be your interior linebackers. Those are kind of the game notes on the defensive side that we're watching.
Yeah, and whenever we were talking about this earlier, you started talking about style points, and I kind of hearkened back to what Nick Saban was saying about this wide receiver room. And Alabama's secondary, I think, contends with the best of them in the nation. But let's talk about this Chattanooga wide receiver room. You have Jamoy Mays sitting at 924 yards, 4 touchdowns, averaging 17.4 per. Javin Watley, 802 yards, 8 touchdowns, 18.2 per. And Sam Phillips, 520 yards, 4 touchdowns, 10.4 per. Now, here's the good thing. And I'm not saying that this makes it an easy outing. They're all under 6 foot. And what I mean when I say that is if you have a guy that's like 6'3", that's running a 4.4, that's putting up those numbers, that's problematic because he can win off of physicality. He can win off of all of these different things. Whereas this is going to be more of an interesting matchup. You, in theory, like Alabama's chances on the outside to be physical with these wide receivers. And that's kind of what Alabama's DBs are known for. They just released that great clip last week of Alabama and Nick Saban in practice, and you got to see Kool-Aid practicing jamming as the receivers came off the line. Chattanooga is an opportunity for Alabama to earn style points. I completely agree with you. And this gets me to something I always talk about. This got me in a little bit of hot water a year and a half ago, Kyle, but it's crazy how fast things change. A year and a half ago, I had a take that a lot of people disagreed with, and that was that not all wins are created equal, nor are all losses created equal. Let me explain. I graduated from the University of North Texas because they offered me scholarship, but North Texas, while it has great academics, is awful in football. Absolutely terrible. If you look, they're the worst defense in all of Division I Power 5. Or, I'm sorry, not Power 5, Division I college football.
I got you.
If you go in and hang 50 points on North Texas as Alabama, that's a win. If you beat them 50-10, that's a win. But if you beat Georgia 50-10, in theory, those wins are not the same.
Sure.
Nor is it the same as if you lose to Georgia by 3 points or lose to North Texas by 3 points. You lose to Georgia by 3 points, everybody's saying, hey, that was a competitive game.
Sure.
They lost to one of the best teams. You lose to North Texas, it's a totally different story. I bring that to your attention because it does address an uncomfortable truth that a lot of people try and pretend isn't there. A truth that, Kyle, you started us off by admitting. Style points are necessary. I know that Nick Saban might not want to run up the score, but right now the committee is looking for something that they deem to be sexy, quote unquote. Putting out Chattanooga early, that can help Alabama. That can help them tremendously. And I love what you said, hearkening back to the Citadel, hearkening back to some of these games where Alabama has been in it. Talk to me about Auburn, though, because when I look at Auburn, Kyle, this is a team that the teams they've lost to, pretty good football teams in terms of if you're going to lose with Auburn's schedule, they've lost to some pretty good teams. Talk to me about Auburn.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing about Chattanooga, and it kind of reverts back to what we were talking about earlier, is what the committee wants to see from Alabama at this point in time, because according to them, they go into every single week with a new slate. They want to see continued momentum from Alabama. Can this team play 4 quarters of play, 3 quarters of strong play against a team they should put away? They have to be able to put this team away. No snafus over the top or whatever. As you mentioned, dealing with the wide receivers, the transfers, a guy from UCLA, who's a big time quarterback. So it is going to present challenges if you are not ready for this particular game. When we look to Auburn, you look at Hugh Freeze and the fact that he's been able to beat Alabama twice. Not a lot of people that can say that they beat Nick Saban once. He's done it twice. He's in a small percentage of coaches to be able to do that. And I think with Auburn right now trending up, this is a very dangerous team. This week they're taking on my alma mater, the New Mexico State Aggies, who, by the way, are bowl eligible, which is pretty amazing. But the Aggies are in for a tall task with Hugh Freeze. And Hugh Freeze just said recently that he could have put up whatever he wanted to against Arkansas. This is a team that, is building themselves, that is excited about football, is excited about Hugh Freeze. He has so much money behind him in the NIL game that they're going to be able to recruit at a very high. They already are. I mean, they flipped some guys that from Georgia and from Alabama. I mean, Hugh Freeze is sitting over there, quietly. Didn't have the season that he wanted to, but he would love nothing more for Christmas than to deflate Alabama's hopes and dreams. We've all gone there before. We've seen the Iron Bowl on TV. I've been there to that game. It's a wild experience because it's just everything transforms, and it seems for whatever reason, if Alabama's up here or if Georgia's up here, the two teams just meet right there in the middle. And for as long as I've been covering Alabama, Georgia has always had a hard-hitting defense. Look, we have some very confident Georgia fans inside the comment box. We love our we love our fans inside the comment box. Some of the names are hilarious too. We appreciate you guys. But let's rewind to that Auburn-Georgia game. Okay, what was the score in that game at one point? Auburn was beating Georgia 10-0. Everybody remembers. Everybody keeps receipts, right? My point is, Jordan-Hare Stadium is a very difficult place to play, and if it wasn't for Brock Bowers, who put it into four-wheel drive and completely and probably the best performance by a single player all season long was in that second half by Brock Bowers, who knows? Maybe Auburn somehow beats Georgia, the first team to beat them in how many games? So my point is, going into that atmosphere with so much on the line, that's a playoff game for Alabama, right? The playoffs are just 4 teams, but really it's not. I mean, you are already in elimination games. That's a tough game for Alabama. Hugh Freeze is going to have those guys ready. It's a sneaky team to deal with. They have a really good offense. The good news for Alabama is they have played well on the road. Going to Texas A&M was about as a challenging environment as you can go. I know everything fell off the rails, but Texas A&M is loud, probably like 113 on the decibel range. They thought that they were going to beat Alabama. They were challenged there as well. So Alabama's proven they can win on the road, but that environment is going to be tough. And look, a lot of these guys have not played in the Iron Bowl. Jalen Murrow has not played in the Iron Bowl. Some of these younger guys have not played in the Iron Bowl. It hits different when you get down there on that 2:30 kick at Jordan-Hare for sure.
Yeah. We got the Georgia fan in here. He's on us, and I love it. Official says, and talking about me saying when I was UNT alum, he says, now you're a Bama fan. I know, man. College is expensive. I went where there was scholarship because I thought I would be heading to graduate school. I had to make the financial decision, and it haunts me to this day. But he asked, who did they flip from UGA? 5-star linebacker DeMarcus Riddick, off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Yeah.
But yeah, they flipped 5-star inside linebacker DeMarcus Riddick, who's from the state of Alabama, in complete transparency. So they had the homeschool. But even Samp, Kyle, says Jordan-Hare's got voodoo. My dogs gave them 2 in our own territory. And it's not just this year, man. I mean, you go back, Samp, you'll remember that fumble-rooski catch where the ball bobbled about 18,000 times and then Auburn came down with it. Who could forget, dare I say it, kick 6? This game is different. And it's one of those games where not only is Jordan-Hare a tough place to play, inevitably when you're talking these rivalry games, all conventional wisdom goes out the window, right? It's just like when, Kyle, to your point, you talked about how Auburn played Georgia really close. That's a really long-standing rivalry game in the SEC. It's one of those games where, Georgia could be the vastly superior team, and because of those rivalry implications, it may be a closer win than a lot of people would expect. So this is a game where, once again, if Alabama wants to earn style points, what better way to do it than against your rival in the Auburn Bowl at Jordan-Hare, against Hugh Freeze, who's beaten Nick Saban twice, who has beaten in Jordan-Hare, they've gotten Nick Saban in Alabama multiple times. It's the perfect storm for Alabama to get that really good win where it can show the committee, hey, these are the style points we have. I'm interested in seeing how it happens, but I love the point you make about Jalen Milroe. He hasn't been in that environment before, but to your credit, the 12th man, that's one of the most difficult places in college football to play, and nobody really talks about it. It's loud.
Yeah, and I think, too, any sort of style point, I don't think it has to be a particular number. I think for this game, the style points against Chattanooga are accumulated by playing a complete game, by dominating from the kickoff, and that's it. Everybody knows how this game is going to go. They can call it rat poison. That's their job, and the players have to focus in. The outside, we know that these two teams are, not evenly matched, and this is the game that they have before Auburn or whatever. Just handle business. Quarter after quarter, play by play. And the style points against Auburn are beating the Tigers on the road. I don't think there's a set value. Now, a 14-point win at Jordan-Hare Stadium would be impressive. A win over Auburn would be impressive, but whatever it is, you just have to continue to win, continue to play 4 quarters of football. And I think that's what, if I'm on the committee and I'm looking at Alabama, I'm like, okay, these guys are red hot, 100%. They're winning games, they're on this win streak, but what type of consistency are they showing right now? Because a lot of the beginning of the season, they weren't consistent. The offense wasn't consistent. The defense has always been consistent. So has this offense continued to trend upward? And that's kind of how I'm viewing Alabama. And I think you go into this game, into the next game, and you show consistency in performance, I think you are definitely rewarded.
100%. And I want to answer this question from James in the comments. He says, why wouldn't UGA losing before they get to the SEC championship game be more beneficial to Bama? If Bama wins, then they'd have UGA out the top 4 and a victory over a top 4 team at the time. Well, because if UGA loses before they get to that game, they're not going to be a top 4 team when they enter into that game.
Yeah.
That will drop their ranking. And right now we're seeing the committee, James, give a lot of credence to an Oregon team that inexplicably so.
Yeah.
Right. You the only thing you can point me to as to why they would give so much credence to Oregon over Alabama or Texas for that matter is style points. And the committee even admitted this. They said, oh, well, they beat Utah and look at their offense.
Yes.
Whereas whenever you talk about Texas and Alabama, it's they beat this team, they beat this team, they beat this team. I bring that up because Alabama needs that continue. Alabama needs Georgia to be at number 1, which is why I was glad that the committee did that. It's far more beneficial for Georgia to stay there. Bama get a win over the number 1 team in the nation, ending that long win streak. I just think it looks better. Kyle, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that Georgia certainly has to. Georgia should have been number 1 from the start. I mean, there was no way that I get it. Ohio State at that point had the only quality 2 wins by beating Notre Dame and Penn State. But overall, I mean, Georgia, who was the team they lost to? Nobody. I mean, this team hasn't lost. They're the 2-time defending champ. They're still winning without Brock Bowers up to that point. But clearly, Missouri and Ole Miss, you turn your heads and you're like, okay, this team can win. And now that Brock Bowers is healthy and the quarterback is playing lights out, and it helps Alabama just like it helps out Georgia. I mean, you want Alabama to continue to be playing red hot as well, right? If you want to be the man, you got to beat the man again. Georgia, I think that out of all the teams in college football, no one wants Alabama. Kirby Smart knows that this team is trending upwards, and he's kind of set himself way far from when he used to coach at Alabama, when he won titles at Alabama. But I think he knows. He understands that the Crimson Tide is rising, and there's not a team in college football right now that wants to deal with the Alabama Crimson Tide, especially with the way that Jalen Miller was trending and this defense is playing. Once this team is completely healthy on the defensive side, which should probably be by that Saturday at Jordan-Hare Stadium, no one wants to deal with Alabama. This team is red hot, laser focused. There's not a team in college football that wants to deal with them in the playoffs.
100%. And I think one of the best ways to close this out is by quoting Malachi Moore, something that you and I have brought up every single time we've met here, a comment he made weeks ago. And that was the realization after the USF game that Alabama was already in the playoffs. Maybe not in literally terms. Geez, we've been at this for too long. I've recorded too long today. Maybe they're not literally in the college football playoffs yet. But it's the concept that every game after that was single elimination. If they lose, it's done.
Yeah.
They're red hot. They're focused. They know what they need to do. And that's why I don't worry as much about them sleepwalking into Chattanooga with Auburn on the horizon, with Georgia on the horizon. I think they know exactly what they need to do. And Kyle, I completely agree. If Alabama wins out, there's no way they should be left out of the college football playoffs, because no other team would have a resume that could even come close to what the Crimson Tide have put together. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be about it from us this evening. Kyle, before I let you get out of here, let everybody know where they can find all of your great content, because you are synonymous with Alabama football. Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much to Bleacher Report for allowing us to be on their platform. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel, definitely download their link. You get access to this before I release it on the YouTube channel. Ty does a great job, and we really appreciate Bleacher Report. You can follow me on Bama Football on YouTube. I really appreciate the support. You have your full-time job. This is my full-time job, so
I really appreciate you supporting me, and I appreciate all the comments inside the comment box. We really appreciate you guys. If you guys are from Georgia or from wherever, like, thank you very much for the feedback. We really appreciate it, and just want to say thanks again. And Ty, you do such a great job. This is an early riser, so go follow his channel, Around the Sports Table. He's doing a really good job. I'm signing off on him. He's done. The work, the grind. You had to be authentic. He checks all those boxes 100%.
Thank you, man. You don't know how much that means, because you are, like I said, just absolutely synonymous with Alabama football. And I couldn't agree more, man. I have to give a special thank you to Bleacher Report, because what they're putting together, I say this every time, it's unique in terms of a major publication looking to content creators from the space that the fans already recognize and say, hey, come in here and do some stuff with us. You're not going to find a much more interactive show from a major publication. And that's one of the things that separates Bleacher Report. Can't thank them enough. Kyle, it's always a pleasure working with you, man. It is so much fun. Guys, thank you for being in the chat. We love all of your opinions. Even if you're a Georgia fan giving us a little bit of trouble, that's fine. Discourse is what matters at the end of the day, and that's how we can move forward. But with all that being said, we're going to close this out with the Roll Tide, and we'll see y'all very soon. That's it. See ya.